opposition to the war protesters is a mighty force.
This election for us is about putting people back at the center of democracy.
And these are candidates who will actually make an effort to do something to prevent gun violence in our state.
And as always, please do take care of each other.
It's a Minnesota mix, gearing up to be heard in St. Paul and Washington. Democratic Visions is handcrafted by volunteers from the southwest suburbs for the entire metro region. Stay with us. Here's producer Jeff Strait.
Minnesotans through the ballot box will again have an important and critical voice on November 4th, Election Day. On this edition of Democratic Visions, we'll be looking at issues, important ones, that local mainstream media, television, radio, and print tend to ignore. Bill Sorum is a retired ad agency executive. Bill is a videography reporter with The Uptake, the independent nonprofit video news service headed by Mike McEntee.
Are some of the foreclosed homes being involved? Or people?
Bill is often the only reporter videographer to show up for a demonstration or press conference.
We are a nation of laws. Well, my reaction is...
Bill and I talked about this problem in late July. Now, Bill, I've been concerned because a lot of people-level protests around town, demonstrations against war for Palestine, Gaza, they never get covered by the major television stations, the Star Tribune, or by MinnPost. But you are there. Are you frustrated with that?
Yeah, a little bit. It's kind of fun being the only one, but then on the other hand, it's just, these people deserve coverage. They deserve a voice, and I get a few of them out, and I've been part of the protesting crowd for over the years, and been used to shouting and that, and being on the other side, you see the frustration, and they're talking about serious stuff.
So you are an activist video journalist, right?
I guess so.
I just wanted to, we actually have a lot of constituents who come in here with personal information, so if I could ask you to wait outside the office suite with the video camera.
Why are you walking out of the federal court building at 4:30 in the afternoon?
Well, we just...
Who are these people? I mean, they're not our enemies, are they?
Well, the first real experience I had in this was with Occupy, when I was covering that, and I was there the very first day, and I said, this is really something. And what happened, this is a bunch of young people. Although Polly Mann at age 92 was there along with some 6-month-old kids, but they really scared the hell out of the establishment. And they were really frightening. They weren't, throwing rocks or any physical damage, but they really scared the hell out of the administration and the Wall Street and so forth. And I saw the coverage just slip away. This is not to be talked about anymore.
In the major media.
Yeah. This wasn't to be talked about in the major media, and the foreclosures, the sad stories that came out there, and again ignored by the media. You'd have cases where 25, 50 cops were surrounding one house with 3 people in it. And the one time when they stormed the police line and then stood and sang songs to them. And so it's a mixture, and the part that encouraged me was all these young people and the younger voices, and they're mixed together with Marie Brown, for example, has been running the Peace Bridge walk every Wednesday for a little over 15 years. The Peace Bridge links Minneapolis-St. Paul and Marshall on the St. Paul side and Lake Street on the Minneapolis side, and it is officially named the Peace Bridge. It was named that in 1991. And Marie Brown has been out there with people every Wednesday, no matter what the weather, and often 15, 20 people. A couple of weeks ago we had like 300, and no media coverage of it. Recently, 1,500 people marched up in Columbia Heights on the edge of Minneapolis. 1,500, that's a lot of people. And the issue was the bombing of Palestine by the Israeli forces. And 1,500 is a big crowd of people. And they had permission of the police, and they did block the streets, they turned around. It was a mixture of all sorts of ages, and it was just the fury, the terror, the passion that these people had. It was some Palestinians, Somalis, Jews, Catholics, Presbyterians, who knows? It was a lot of people, a lot of little kids. And it was the outrage about what was happening in Palestine.
Well, we're here because we're here to support Palestine. And you simply don't even have to be Muslim to be here. You simply have to be human. Because what Israel is doing to those kids is just, as a mother, it breaks my heart.
Hi there.
My grandmother was Hungarian, and her entire family perished in World War II in Hungary. And this can't happen in her name.
And when I followed him down the street with my car, it was about 2.5 blocks of a full car lane width of people walking down about eight blocks. Not a word in the mainstream press.
Were you the only camera person there?
Actually, 2 other independent video guys there. None of them from the major media. They're all individual owners. I have a bit of an outlet with the uptake, but these 2 guys are on their own.
What's wrong with our local news media? Why aren't they covering this stuff?
Well, I think there's a couple of answers. The one that the more vehement protesters say is that the Zionists control the media and will not allow anything to be contrary to the programs of Israel. And I think that's part of it. And part of it is it's hard to deal with. You know, they don't want to talk about the babies with their heads blown off. And the one series I saw of a sniper took him 3 shots to kill a 12-year-old kid on a beach in Gaza. The kid's laying there flopping around, and he shoots him twice more, and he finally they don't want to talk about that. And so what happens is that people get angry. And so far it's all been very, very peaceful. There have been some civil disobedience, but the people are hurt because they're not being listened to. Governor Dayton goes out to a synagogue last week and apologizes for Palestinian rockets and whatnot. Supposedly there were 1,000 people there. The paper, Star Tribune, reported that. They reported there were 1,000 people there and that there were 20 protesters outside. Well, you know, a couple of days later, there were 300 over in St. Paul, 300 protesters.
Demonstrations have been part of life in America since the 60s. Have demonstrations had their day? Do they have much effect anymore? I mean, it seems like a lot of these causes, whether we agree with them or not, aren't making a dent with the demonstrations.
I think in some ways they have run their course, and people are getting used to seeing people on the streets, and but I ask anyone to go out and walk among these people, and I ask them, why are you here? And the 80-some-odd-year-old nun told me that I have to be here. You know, I'm doing this for myself. I have to be here. I can't let this go. And even young people say, you know, I can't let this happen. I have to be there. And that's the voice that is so rarely reported. You know, we will report the violence, but the humility, the passion, the sincerity of people saying, no, we don't need to do this anymore.
Same-sex marriages have been legal in Minnesota, and you covered a lot of those demonstrations.
Well, the demonstrations on same-sex marriage and on the voter ID issue, I think, really did make a difference. The sincerity and the intensity of feelings came through, and some of them were covered by the major media, but I think that people who paid any attention to what was going on saw a quite different story than they had before. The Archbishop's DVD did a lot to help because that really offended a lot of people. Yeah. You know, these are people, these are ordinary people. In the case of the gay marriage thing, you know, these are your friends and neighbors. These aren't, you know.
Well, the same could be said for the anti-war demonstrators, for the pro-Israel demonstrators, and for the pro-Gaza demonstrators. They are all people in the end.
Opposition to the war protesters is a mighty force, but the opposition to war protesters is a military-industrial complex that Eisenhower and so many have warned us about. And wars make way too much money for these people. They're very highly profitable.
Sure.
It's self-preservation is the most important thing. It's far more important than the well-being of the United States. Protesters simplify things, and we're dealing with complex issues. And I'm not suggesting that they should make them complicated, but stop the war now and peace now and the rallies and the chants. Simplify what is a very profound issue.
But it's needed.
Yeah, it's needed. Yep. And I'm out there because I have to be.
We all know that even if we strongly support a cause or an issue, we're highly unlikely to participate in a street demonstration or occupy an office of, say, a U.S. senator.
Senator Franken, this is Alana.
I just don't know how you can sit there on the other end of the phone and just spout nonstop.
Even talking about politics among friends at the local Dunn Brothers is a hurdle for most of us. And at local latte pumps, caffeine heads are mostly texting, tweeting, and liking pet photos on Facebook. But if you name any issue you're concerned with, say education, climate change, potholes, high taxes, just Google it. But before you do that, add the name Minnesota to it. It'll connect you to a link that will bring you to a local group that can help you out.
They really have saved lives.
That's what my colleague Pat Lynn did. Pat is concerned about stalled gun control legislation. She contacted the Minnesota chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense and organized a backyard coffee. She invited friends, as well as Minnesota House candidates Joan Howe-Pullis and incumbent Yvonne Seltzer. And they both showed up. So did Rebecca Lowen from Moms Demand Action.
There are 15 states in the country that have been chosen where there's going to be a heavy push at the state level to make some legislative change. And the exciting thing about that is Minnesota is one of them. And right now we are creating a statewide coalition of groups that are supportive of this effort to reduce gun violence. And so, as you were saying, we've launched a campaign to ask voters to pledge to vote for candidates this November who have gun sense. And these are candidates who will actually make an effort to do something to prevent gun violence in our state, as opposed to legislators who just automatically do whatever the gun lobby wants them to do.
There are many emails and phone calls against any type of gun legislation. So the more that legislators hear from their constituents that they do want these reasonable controls, the easier I think it will be to pass some really significant legislation.
We're a nonpartisan organization, so we can only focus on this particular issue regardless of party. We're just looking for those candidates who will support sensible gun laws.
Will they have to then turn over their firearms to someone in the court?
We would like to contact people a few weeks before the election to remind them of their pledge, and if they're uncertain which candidates do have gun sense and which ones don't, we can help them identify the ones that do. And if they go to the national website, which is momsdemandaction.org, they can actually do the pledge online.
This land was made for you and me. This land is yours.
Another way of making a mark is to volunteer for the candidates of your choice. It's fun, it's social, you learn things, and it can turn a close election into a win. It's easy to get started. For example, Democrats in the west and southwest suburbs have a coordinated campaign office in Hopkins. A number of candidates are set up there. Here's Mars Beltrande to tell us about it. He's working for House District 42A incumbent and candidate Yvonne Seltzer.
It's a pretty casual office. So we've got people from the Franken campaign, from the regular DFL, people from Sharon Sun's campaign, and two House organizers. So myself and someone who's working for Paul Rosenthal and Ron Earhart.
The sign campaign only needs to tell where and when.
I'm volunteering because I actually had the chance to work with Yvonne at the State House in St. Paul and got to see all the good work that she was doing and thought it'd be really fun and also really worthwhile to come out and help her out, help make sure she gets reelected.
I believe we phone bank on Sundays and Mondays if you're available then.
There's a lot of young people that come in. A lot of recent grads actually work here. We got a pretty good sized high school volunteer contingent, senior citizens who come in during the days and help out and make some calls. I mean, most of what we're doing throughout the day is it's calling volunteers, trying to recruit people to come in and help us out, calling voters and trying to persuade them to vote for our candidates, and it's organizing door knocks, training people in how to do all these things. It's really important that people come out and volunteer right now. We're trying to knock on everybody's door in the district 3 times, and so that means we have to start now because that's 10,000 doors that we got to hit, and it takes a long time, even with the help of volunteers. So just give us a call if you're interested. We're located in downtown Hopkins at a building called Cobblestone Court in 915 Main Street. You can ask for me personally. My name is Mars, and I'm looking forward to seeing you here.
Edina, Hopkins, Bloomington, Minnetonka, and Eden Prairie and Plymouth residents should contact the campaigns of their favorite Democratic candidates to get started. Just Google their names. Their websites will help you get connected.
Now, party politics are a natural function of a healthy democracy. But party politics, driven by the doctrinaires and the very rich, can undermine the common good.
This election for us is about putting people back at the center of democracy. For far too long, we believe that our community and our democracy has been hijacked by partisan politics.
Reverend Paul Slack of Minneapolis is president of Isaiah, a statewide coalition of approximately 90 congregations.
But simply having conversations with our public leaders and community members is not enough.
Named for the Old Testament prophet Isaiah, the multi-denominational group was formed 14 years ago. At a September 3rd press conference, Isaiah launched a statewide election season initiative.
We're here to proclaim our plans to create a statewide faith movement that will unite tens of thousands of people from the African American communities, Latino communities, communities from the Twin Cities Metro and Greater Minnesota around our faith, our values, and a goal to win policies that will move our communities towards racial and economic justice.
It's a nonpartisan effort called the Prophetic Voter Campaign. It is hoped that it will be a vehicle for people of faith to bring about racial, economic, and educational equity.
My congregation is faced with the realization that inequity in our education system is just as real in the suburbs as it is in the urban centers. We support a remarkable local elementary school and their faculty by providing weekend meals for hungry kids, school supplies, winter coats, and regular tutoring. But it is clear that all the passion and love we bring to that school cannot balance a larger system of racial inequity in the enforcement of school discipline policies and cannot balance the achievement gap between white kids and kids of color. It is simply unacceptable that in our state, my son has a better chance of a solid education than another mother's son simply because of the color of his skin.
My community has been working on being recognized and to live with dignity in this country, but it has been a long road. Many have given up hope in politicians and the American dream. But I believe things can change if we unite together, participate, and vote. We can show the strength of a community that works together.
I am working really hard to change things. I advocate for my kids to get a good education every day. I work with other parents that do not have the time nor the resources I do. When I vote this year, I am going to vote for change for my family and for all families. When I vote, I know I will not be alone.
We will talk to 56,000 people of faith in Minnesota who need to know that at this time we're going to stand together and work together until we have our values reflected in all of our communities.
Now in Minnesota, where state and congressional elections are won or lost by only a few votes, Isaiah says it will have an impact in November.
And together we will make the difference and hold our public officials accountable. After talking with the 56,000 voters, we will turn out 15,000 of those to the polls who will vote as prophetic faith leaders. We will stand together as leaders and faith people who are committed to each other for an agenda that reflects what we need.
If you want to know more, link up to IsaiahMN.org. That's IsaiahMN.org.
Right now, a Junkyard Democrat's golden oldie. It was made 2 years ago, but still has perfect pitch for Minnesota Congressional District 3.
Well, our good neighbor Eric Paulson is running for Congress again. Oofda.
I keep a close watch on his party line.
I keep my eyes wide open all the time.
I keep my radar on for lies that blind without a spine. He talks a line.
Paulson, Republican.
He's got a way to keep you on his side.
He'll give you pain with votes he tries to hide.
His popularity will take a slide without a spine. He talks a line.
Eric Paulson, Republican.
As sure as night is dark and day is light.
He votes for BS from the wingnut right.
For big buck donors, he will fight their fight without a spine. He talks a line.
America deserves better than this bill, and you deserve better. Thanks for being here today and having your voice be heard.
Yahoo!
For big buck donors, he will fight their fight without a spine. He talks a line.
Yahoo! Yahoo!
Hi, Eric. Bye, Eric.
You know, Congressional District 3 voters can retire Eric Paulson by giving Sharon Sun a big win on November 4th.
We can only do it if we send representatives to Washington that share our common Minnesota values. That when we invest in our families and our communities, that's when we can begin to accomplish great things.
On Sunday, August 31st, I attended a memorial service in celebration of the good works and very large life of Andy Driscoll.
Once more next week, we talk about new resources for those who suffer from mental health issues and initiatives.
Andy's life was an ongoing, lively civic forum. Now, in later years, that meant countless committee meetings, the St. Paul Neighborhood Network, that's a cable TV access channel, and KFI Radio.
Has served as a tool for activism.
Andy and Michelle Alamirati co-hosted Truth to Tell on Monday mornings.
An independent teaching and performing
Andy
arts.
Driscoll, well, he was St. Paul Irish and political. He loved his city and was for the little guy, the struggling mom, and transparent government. Access television and community radio enabled him to empower others.
And as always, please do take care of each other.
Andy and I first met in 1978 at KTCA TV. He was producing a documentary on the grassroots fight against high-voltage power lines in central Minnesota. Heated assemblies, protest marches, civil disobedience, arrests, and even sabotage really upset Lake Wobegon country.
Resistance to the line, one of the largest in the world.
The KTCA documentary caught the appreciative eye of a DuPont Columbia journalism panel, as well as those who mistrust government, big utilities, and the fraud known as Minnesota Nice. Now, the film was just a wink in Andy's full life. I learned that at a celebration of that life in late September. The Rice Street Hall was packed with family, friends, and stories. Andy Driscoll was remembered as the kind of wily, big-hearted, civic-minded watchdog every city deserves. Fellow social justice advocate, friend, and political scientist Tom O'Connell had long watched Andy's back.
Where's Andy going now that he's not with us anymore?
Well, you know, the way I figure, if I were God, I wouldn't want him in heaven because he'd be questioning my authority. If I were the devil, I wouldn't want him in hell because he's just too damn righteous.
A few years ago at St. Thomas University, during a memoriam gathering for activist Marv Davidoff, I asked Andy about the iconic civil rights and anti-war demonstrator.
Well, Marv was a longtime friend and a soul brother in terms of the progressive movement in this town. And when I came back from Detroit, Jeff, we sat down and I needed to talk with him about a good idea to do for a documentary at Channel 2. And at that time, he said, the power line, do something on the power line. And I said, what power line? Those of us who had been spending that much time in Detroit didn't know that much about what was going on. And so I wound up pitching the show to my producers at Channel 2. And sure as heck, we did it, and we won a DuPont Columbia Award for it, thanks to Marv Davidoff. Anyway, he and I remained friends from the rest of that time on. My sister was a charter member of the Honeywell Project, so we had a family.
I guess campaigning for justice runs in the family.
3 years ago, the Southwest Suburban Cable Commission, which oversees cable service to Edina, Minnetonka, Hopkins, Richfield, and Eden Prairie, almost shut down the production of community cable access programs like Democratic Visions.
Now, despite the odds, that did not happen. Southwest Access TV producers organized. We made a good case to our cable commission and our 5 city councils to keep access production alive.
612-3.
Before we got there, Andy Driscoll gave us an hour on Truth to Tell. And you know what? We took Andy's advice. We took care of one another. Others pitched in, and a community asset was kept alive.
So Andy and the KFI radio team and the rest of you, a big thanks. We're better than ever because we participated in the process. Now, don't just sit there. Get out and get active. Thank you.
Democratic Visions is independently handcrafted by lefty Southwest Suburban volunteers for the entire metro region.